Welcome back. We're chatting with candidate for Congress in the 3rd District opposing Jason Chaffetz, Stephen Tryon. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. And we're ready to talk economy, which is my second priority. And, Utah prides itself on having a strong economy, but I think there are some reasons for concern, and especially there are some reasons for concern in the 3rd District. There's a very strong corridor there along I-15, but when you get into the southeastern part of the state, it's not so strong. The unemployment rate in Price and Monticello and Moab is actually twice what it is in Salt Lake City.
Wow.
And a full percentage point above the national average. So it's about 3% in Salt Lake City, they say, and 6% in Price, Monticello, and Moab. And in that whole part of the state, there's really not a lot of infrastructure. And so I think we need to focus on that, and we need to improve how we're taking care of that rural part of Utah. And it doesn't have to be just extraction mining activities as well. There are some other things we can do, and I have some ideas along those lines. Another statistic, though, just to emphasize the point that the economy is something we need to pay attention to, and it's an issue, and that is homelessness. Homelessness increased 7% in Utah, they said, and that's 17% among families in Utah.
Wow.
But again, when you look to the rural parts of the state, it's actually up 20%. And in Utah, Wasatch, and Summit counties, it's up 25%. So for homelessness to spike 20% in the areas outside of Salt Lake City and up to 25% in those 3 counties I just mentioned, that's a serious problem. The economy is not as good as people are saying it is in the state of Utah, and we need to address that. And I don't think Congress is doing that. I don't think our representatives are doing that.
And I suppose this is a little bit of asked and answered, but is there a bias against more rural areas, in this case of your congressional district, but of Utah, the United States, generally speaking? Do those less densely populated areas, will they always face that uphill battle of not getting the same recognition for what the environment really is like?
Well, I think that's true, and I think the reason is that there are fewer votes there, and so I think politicians, career politicians, make a very cynical trade-off in that regard, and that's one of the things that I offer is that my pledge is to represent all of the people of the 3rd District, and I would put a special emphasis on the rural areas because they're lagging, and we need to encourage the businesses along the I-15 corridor to reach out and help with infrastructure and jobs, and we can do that in some creative ways. Again, I have some experience in business, and I have some experience in putting development centers in other places and putting customer care centers in other places from where the mothership is. And so, businesses can spread the wealth a little bit better than they can in Utah, but it takes an engaged representative to make that happen, and that's what I want to do for the 3rd District.
Well, without a doubt, it's always an interesting topic with respect to the fact that it seems to me as though the economy is a topic that is either sort of the sky is falling or a topic that kind of gets lost. And maybe that's just my sense, but when you're talking about a district, for example, like the 3rd District, where there are large areas that are lightly populated, that are rural areas, that these are huge issues because those constituents, those people, those human beings have just as much need and right to a good life as someone who lives in Salt Lake City and may have a higher income and because of
And this is one of my favorite charts to kind of cap off that talk about the economy, because this is not just a trend that's happened since the Great Recession here of 2008. This actually goes back as far as 1989. This data comes from the Wall Street Journal. Again, it's always important to pay attention to your sources. What you're looking at here on each side is distribution of wealth in America. And on the left hand, from the difference between 1989 and 2014 is that the top 3%, which is what's represented by the red bar, has increased significantly in the share of American wealth, the concentration of wealth. Again, this is a Bernie Sanders talking point. It's my slide from 2014. I tell people he stole my talking points. He's almost going to get elected president. confident. But that's a problem. It's a problem for the American dream that I emphasized as sort of the foundation of everything, is that, you know, we're creating a middle class, or we're destroying a middle class, actually. I mean, the wealth that's in the bottom 97% of America is getting sucked into that top 3%. That's who the government's representing. And that's why you need to elect somebody like me, who's not a career politician, but a career public servant, to go and actually take on some of these issues. You know, I like to tell people that Congress is the temple of our republic. And we've let the money changers in the temple for too long, and it's time that we sent somebody like me in to kick them out.
You know, I have to say that I was having a conversation very close to this exact topic, and the money changers came up. So I'm having a little bit of a chuckle, because I really like the analogy, and it carries a great power for me personally. I think the other thing that this so starkly demonstrates that is really puzzling to me is that there's such a working class support nowadays for the GOP that is, to a certain extent, and I try not to overcharacterize things, but the party that has really supported this fissure of broad distribution of income, and yet there's such a strong working class support for that party that a lot of times it seems to me as though it's more of a social attraction to the Republican Party, and yet I am speaking to people for whom the disappearance of the American dream is a terrible, currently intractable problem, and yet in so many ways it's pushed to the side for a preference for social issues and kind of moral focus in terms of the choice of party.
It goes back to the importance of education, though, because I think that the middle class in America has been deceived. There is a double speak that happens around issues of government and issues of the economy, and that we've allowed the distribution of wealth to be changed. We've allowed government to sort of restructure itself in ways that favor the very rich, because people are lulled to sleep by phrases like free speech and freedom of religion, when in fact what's going on, and what an educated person would be able to see, what's going on has very little to do with free speech or freedom of religion. You know, the Affordable Care Act is a great example of that. And this chart shows health care spending as a percent of GDP, and it goes from 1980 through 2012. And this top red line is the United States, and this is the rest of the industrialized world. Okay, and what this basically shows you is that we've been getting screwed in America with health care costs forever, for a long time. And it's not an accident that it kind of lines up with the way the distribution of wealth is going. You know, so when I hear people who oppose the Affordable Care Act, and I support the Affordable Care Act, I think we need to tweak it maybe, but it's an important piece of legislation to address this problem, which is an important reason why this problem has been happening. And you know, we've got to, what I see happen in the public dialogue is that a company like, United Healthcare will come out and say, oh, we're losing money because of the Affordable Care Act. Well, you go in and look at their earnings per share, and I beg to differ. It's a very profitable company. There may be some small part of it that's losing money, but I don't think the company overall is hurting. I think there's a question of how much profit is enough. And
again, there is a difference between the characterization and what the data actually shows, and of course there's spin, without a doubt. Hey, we got to get to environment. I know we got to save some time for our friends, the fellas in Cinders. I don't want to cut them off, so let's talk quickly about environment and be on our way, my friends.
Environment is easy for me. I am calling for a 21st century Manhattan Project to address climate change. It's that serious. It's that urgent. We have to put the entire resources of the federal government into a Manhattan project, Manhattan-style project to address climate change, and I think the headquarters for that should be in Price, Utah. And I think the headquarters for that should be in Price, Utah, because it helps us distribute some of the infrastructure and economic benefit of that to that part of the rural district that we were talking about earlier that could use some help. And also because that's coal country.
Right.
So we've got people who are in the energy industry, and we can use some of that expertise, and we can retrain and re-leverage some of that expertise to help us increase solar, increase wind, increase nuclear, which doesn't cause the global warming problems that other kinds of fuel cause, and also a big research project, a big research initiative to address what's next. How do we mitigate what we've already done to our planet? There's some things we can do that could be really cool for Utah, could be really cool for Park City. We seed the clouds here, we reflect, we lower the temperature, the average temperature in this area. We might be able to stabilize the ski season a little bit more and extend it a little bit more. I don't know, I'm not the scientific brain. I have a Bachelor of Science from West Point and a Master of Arts in Philosophy from Stanford.
Well, I think that in particular, to put a point on it, I think that is an issue that you could be successful in reaching across the aisle in a heavily Republican state, because Democrat or Republican, everybody likes to ski. And everybody likes to enjoy that greatest snow on earth, for sure.
Absolutely. Terry, thank you so much.
My pleasure, brother. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for your efforts on our behalf, and we wish you happy campaigning, and let's get together right here again soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, you guys, quick break. We got lots more music from Cinders, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.